Hi, I'm Bill Murray. This is my submission for Standard 10, the Leadership Project. So let's look at the description. I am the kind of de facto head of the Social Studies department at our school. We've only got 3 teachers. I've been here the longest, so they've sort of put me in charge. And part of my assignments are that I have to organise a Social Studies fair for the high school next semester. So they've given me a rough date at the middle of November 2018. It's got to be a full day event from 8:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon, and it has to involve all of the high school students, which is about 75 or 80, and all the high school teachers. So I thought that the best way of doing this, because I'm also the director here at the school for the Model United Nations Club, and we've been to a whole lot of conferences around China, and I really enjoy doing that, and I think it's very, very good for the students. They get a lot of practice in a lot of different disciplines. So I thought that a good idea would be to have a one-day Model United Nations conference here at the school. But obviously a lot of the students haven't done Model United Nations, so we would just be using the style of Model UN, but we would be stripping away all the kind of formal language and all the kind of formality, and just using the basic concept where students are coming together and discussing problems and drafting solutions to those problems. So the way it works is that you divide the students up into committees. You would have the Human Rights Council, Security Council, General Assembly, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And each of those committees then, you assign the students a country, and then each committee has different topics to deal with. For example, the Security Council might deal with nuclear disarmament on the Korean Peninsula. General Assembly might deal with tackling child poverty, human trafficking. UNODC might deal with legalizing drugs. So you've got all these different topics. So each committee would be assigned maybe 2 or 3 topics that they would debate, and then each student is assigned a country, and they have to go ahead and research their country's stance on those issues. For example, nuclear disarmament on the Korean Peninsula. China would be very much for nuclear disarmament on the Korean Peninsula. South Korea, of course, at the moment might take a slightly different approach to that because their neighbour is being so aggressive. So they research their country's stance, and then they give an opening speech outlining that stance, and then they come together and they draft resolutions, which is where they have to find other countries with a similar viewpoint to their own who would support their draft resolution. So they'll get a couple of countries together and they'll draft a solution to the problem that they've been given. And then once you've got a couple of these draft resolutions, then they go to a vote, and then the students vote yes or no to implement the resolution. So the purpose then of the day is I want to start in the social studies department. I really worry that, and I spoke to the other teachers about this, I worry that we don't have any interdisciplinary projects or activities. And I feel like the students kind of are studying in a sort of a vacuum. So they study economics in a vacuum, they study politics in a vacuum, and they find it quite difficult to make connections between them. So that's where this Model UN conference would give them the chance to apply all their social studies learning from all their different subjects, because they're going to have to draw on their knowledge of geography, history, economics, politics, psychology, in order to think about these problems and draft effective resolutions. The other thing is it would be a really good chance to increase staff collaboration, because I don't work very closely with the other social studies teachers at the moment, and we definitely don't work closely with the other departments. So I think this would be a really good chance for us to increase our staff collaboration. So the objectives then for the students, it's definitely to, number one, I think it's a really good chance for them to practice public speaking and debate. So it would increase their confidence in public speaking. Debate then is going to, that's going to encourage their critical thinking. They have to work together to draft resolutions. So that promotes collaboration, problem solving. They've got to negotiate, they've got to compromise. So these are all 21st century skills that are very much in demand these days in the modern workplace. And then the last one, as I mentioned before, it would encourage them to apply the full breadth of their social studies knowledge. So pulling together their knowledge about economics and politics, etc. Okay, the impact then. On the students, as we've just talked about then, it's going to increase their interdisciplinary skills, critical thinking, public speaking, collaboration, problem solving. So I've just mentioned that. If we move on to the faculty, I think this is more important where it's going to be a chance for us to engage in some PD. It'll get us planning together collaboratively, which as I mentioned, we haven't really done a lot of. It'll be good for us in the social studies department to work more closely together. But the last two I think are most important. Oh, sorry, the fourth one here is most important, where it would lay the groundwork for future collaboration. Because ideally, I'd like to see us moving more to you've got the Scandinavian model now, where it's not so much, subjects aren't so important, it's much more about project-based learning, but it's interdisciplinary. So there's an element of math to it, there's an element of science to it, there's an element of social studies. So that would be really good if we could start to, I'm not suggesting that they're going to get rid of all the different curriculums here and combine them into one project-based learning, but platform. But if we could make a move towards more collaboration and interdisciplinary activities, that would be fantastic. And then the last one, we're going to have to work together because all the high school teachers are going to be involved in this, so I'm going to be leading them, and that will, I think, be good for interdepartmental collaboration, because then we get to see what we do in social studies, and maybe we can kind of pull our ideas, so that would be good. Okay, the school mission. Our school does not have a mission statement, but as I mentioned when I was doing the introduction for Standard 10, I researched quite a few mission statements, so I took one from an international school that I thought was pretty good, where you're providing each student with a diverse education, safe, supportive environment, self-discipline, motivation, and you're assisting the students in developing skills to become independent, self-sufficient, and then they can succeed and contribute responsibly in the global community. So I think this project fits the bill because it's definitely, like I talked about, those 21st century skills are very much in demand. So I think this project would help them to develop those skills, which are going to help them in the workplace in the future. Okay, last one then, parents in the local community. This is really not applicable. We're out in the a kind of slightly rural area of China. We don't have a lot of contact with the local community. And we have very little contact with their parents because it's a boarding school. Parents live in Korea mostly, and we don't see them, or they live in different cities in China, so we only see them once or twice a year. So there's not really this project. Last one then, implementation and success. So this is a basic timeline. This is where I said they've given me a rough date of, if we work backwards here at the bottom, you can see Friday the 16th of November. That's been penciled in. So I've got the timeline set up where at the start of October then we'll be meeting with the social studies department and brainstorming and discussing how we're going to go about this. The next day then I can meet the heads of the other departments and give them a briefing. And then by the 20th of October, I want to have all the committees confirmed and the topics decided. But I'm going to work with the students on that so that they have input on that. I don't want to just be saying to them, okay, you're going to discuss these topics. 1st of November then is the deadline for Taobao. This is like Amazon in China, or eBay. So, for example, little placards for the different countries, flags, hammers and gavels, just little things like that. That's the deadline for ordering those. By the 10th of November, then we'll have the chair reports finished. This is where each committee has two or three students who are chairing the committee, and they prepare a report, like a research report, on the topic for that committee, and then they distribute that to the students in the committee so that they can read through the chair reports, and that helps them to prepare their sort of opening speeches and helps them to start thinking about the topics. So that's 10th of November. And then 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th of November would be, the chairs would be having workshops with their students to prep them for the social studies fair, which would take place on the 16th of November. Last section then is success, like how would we measure success? So I think a lot of this would come from student feedback, whether they thought that it was useful and whether they found that they were able to draw on all their social studies knowledge, or if they really struggled. Grade comparisons. Well, I mean, I've put that down there, but that could be quite tricky because, I mean, for just for a one-day conference to look at their grades before and after, I don't know that you can talk to make conclusions from that. So primarily, I think this is going to be student feedback and teacher feedback, seeing how the teachers, if they thought it was useful, or if they thought it was too difficult, or if the students weren't really getting into it. So a lot of student and teacher feedback, I think, for this one. So that is basically everything about the social studies fair. So I'm hoping it's going to be acceptable whenever I propose it, and I hope it goes well, because if it doesn't, then the blame will lie pretty squarely with me. So thanks for listening.